The median 401k balance in America is $38,176. Not $380,000, not a million, just $38,176. That exact figure comes straight from Vanguard's How America Saves 2025 report. Now here's the strange part. The average balance is $148,153, almost 4 times higher. Both numbers are true. One describes a real person, one describes a math problem. Hidden inside that gap is a group quietly on track for the top 5%. And most of them have no idea. They feel ordinary. They feel behind even. I'm going to prove in the next few minutes why 3 quiet signs matter most. Let me show you why almost everyone feels behind. The reason is the average. The average balance gets dragged upward by a handful of enormous accounts at the very top. Picture a silent escalator. You're standing on it, carried upward the entire time. But because it moves so smoothly, you can't feel it rising at all. Beside you is a staircase where loud people sprint past, sweating, flashing every step. You assume they're winning. Hold that picture. We'll come back to it. Now the numbers, straight from the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances. Households aged 55 to 64 hold an average retirement balance of $537,560. But the median for that exact same group is just $185,000. That gap, $537,560 versus $185,000, is the escalator illusion in one line. The average is inflated by the top. The median is the real person. Think about what that single gap actually does to your head every single day. You see the average everywhere, in articles, in ads, in casual conversation, and you quietly measure your own life against a number no real person holds. It is a benchmark designed almost perfectly to make ordinary savers feel small. Here's the part nobody mentions. Look at retirement accounts across all Americans. The 90th percentile holds $463,000. The 95th percentile holds $923,000. The 99th percentile holds $2.63 million. Those figures come from the Federal Reserve. Read them slowly. The jump from 90th to 95th percentile is enormous. And the jump up to the 99th percentile is structurally insane. What this means is simple, and almost nobody says it out loud. You do not need millions of dollars to be near the very top. You need far less than the loud headlines constantly imply that you do. The average American saver puts away 7.7% of their paycheck, according to Vanguard. That's a record high. With the employer match, the total lands around 12%. That single number is the entire national savings picture, top to bottom. So if you're doing even slightly more than that, consistently, you're not behind. You are quietly, invisibly, and structurally ahead of nearly everyone around you. But you'd never know it, because you compare yourself to the inflated average. You're watching the staircase sprinters and completely ignoring your own escalator. And the cruelest part is that this misread happens silently over decades. Right up until you retire and discover where you actually stood the whole time. So here's exactly what we're doing in this video. 3 things in order. First, the real benchmark, what the top 5% looks like at your age. Second, the 3 quiet signs you're already on the escalator without feeling it. Third, the proof math, how an ordinary balance becomes a top tier one. No products, no genius stock picks, just time and the numbers, laid out honestly. But first, meet Dale, 58 years old, a maintenance supervisor in Ohio. He never once earned 6 figures. He still drives a 9-year-old truck. And he is completely convinced that he is far behind on retirement. I'll come back to Dale soon. What he found at 58 is why this exists. Stay with me. The 3 signs. Let me give them in order, because you might already do them. Sign number 1. Your savings rate is quietly above the national norm. Remember the Vanguard figure. The average American saves 7.7% of their paycheck. Most people who reach the top 5% are not earning enormous salaries at all. They are simply saving a much larger slice of what they actually make. The Ramsey National Study of Millionaires looked closely at over 10,000 millionaires. And it found something that completely breaks the wealthy stereotype people carry. 70% of them earned under $100,000 a year over their entire careers. Let me say that again. 7 in 10 never had a 6-figure income. Only 15% of them ever held a senior leadership role at work. and just 20% of them received any inheritance at all. The thing they shared was not income at all, it was rate. They saved 15 to 20% consistently year after year while everyone else spent. So run your own number, contribution plus the match divided by your pay. If that number is 15% or higher, you are not average at all. You are double the national rate, and here's why that matters so much. Consider an ordinary case. Say that you earn exactly $70,000 a year. The average saver at 7.7% puts away only about $5,290 annually. But the top track saver at 15% puts away $2,500 each year. Same salary, same job, the only difference is the size of the slice. Now let that slice compound at a 7% return for 25 years. $2,500 a year invested steadily at 7% grows to roughly $710,000. The 7.7% saver, all else completely equal, lands near just $365,000. Same income, same years, but nearly double the outcome, decided by the rate. Here's the uncomfortable truth hiding inside that 7.7% national savings rate. It includes everyone, the diligent savers and the people who barely save anything. So beating it is not some heroic financial feat. It is a simple decision. A decision you make once, automate, and then almost never think about again. Let me show you the sheer power of just 1 extra percent over time. On an $80,000 salary, 1% is only about $800 a year saved. But invested at 7% for 30 years, that $800 becomes roughly $80,000. 1%, $80,000, from a decision that costs almost nothing now. Now imagine quietly stacking 5 or 6 of those percentage points on top. That is how ordinary people quietly build genuinely extraordinary retirement balances. That is sign 1. A high, steady rate means the escalator already moves. Sign number 2, your money is boring and you have never panic sold. This sounds far too simple to matter. It is the most expensive habit there is. The Millionaire Research found the wealthy invested broadly, index funds, steady contributions. And crucially, they stayed fully invested through every single market downturn. They did not flee in 2008. They did not flee in 2020 either. They did nothing on purpose. Vanguard's data proves doing the least one. Selling locks in the loss. Sitting still lets the escalator keep climbing. Here's the math on doing nothing. Imagine $300,000 invested back in 2007. By early 2009, it had fallen to roughly $180,000, a brutal $120,000 loss. The panic seller turned that temporary paper loss into a permanent, real one. The person who sat still left that exact same account completely untouched. By 2024, it had quietly recovered to well over $1.1 million. The entire fortune was built in the very years the seller missed. Boring won and loud lost, and that simply is sign number 2. If you've ever watched your balance fall and just done nothing, that counts. Sign number 3, your net worth crossed a line you never once checked. Most people track one number, their 401k, and ignore everything else entirely. But the real benchmark the Federal Reserve actually uses is total net worth. Everything you own minus everything you owe, your home equity included. Add it all up, and most disciplined savers are far higher than they think. Here are the real lines, straight from Federal Reserve retiree data. The median net worth for ages 60 to 64 is exactly $392,160. The 75th percentile, the top quarter of households, is $1,931,122s. And the top 10% threshold sits all the way at $3,000 and $40,280s. Now layer in the household line. The top 5% sits near $117 million. So if your total net worth approaches $1 million, you're not just okay. You are brushing the top 5% line and probably filed it under behind. That is the trap. You benchmark against $148,153 in a single account. And you never once check the line that you have already quietly crossed. Sign 3 is the quietest because net worth grows where you don't look. The mortgage shrinking, the home value drifting up, dividends reinvesting on their own. All of it quietly, structurally, and invisibly happening month after month. One more thing about these 3 signs before we finally meet Dale again. There is a force working against all of them, and it's just as quiet. Fees, the average fund and advisor can quietly skim 1 to 2% yearly. That sounds tiny on paper, but it absolutely is not tiny at all. On a $500,000 balance, a 1% fee is $5,000 every single year. Up market or down, it skims. Over 25 years, it erases $400,000 plus. The advisor earns it structurally, automatically, without a single new idea ever. Simply because your balance exists at all. That is the entire model. So the top 5% saver does one more boring thing, keeps costs near zero. Low-cost index funds, no expensive products, the 0.61% they refuse to pay compounds. 3 signs: high rate, patient and boring, quiet net worth, and one enemy. Fees, which the disciplined keep starved, hold all of that for one moment. Because Dale checked every single box and still thought that he had failed. So let's finally go back to Dale, 58 Water Treatment Plant, Ohio. His actual numbers are the whole entire point, so please look closely. Dale started contributing to his very first 401k at age 30. He never earned more than $78,000 in a single year of his life. For most of his long career, he made considerably less than that. But from the very start, he put in 14% of every paycheck. His employer added 4% on top, 18% total automatically every year. Every year, before he ever once saw the money land in his account. He did not think of himself as an investor at all, ever. He thought of it as a bill that he paid to his future self. He never picked a single individual stock in his entire working life. Let me tell you what Dale did not do, because it matters just as much. He never chased a hot stock that a coworker swore was a guarantee. He never moved his money into something complicated that he didn't understand. He never tried to time the bottom or call the top of a market. His account sat in 2 boring index funds, total market and bonds. When the market crashed hard in 2008, his balance fell nearly 40%. He told me honestly that he felt physically sick watching it happen. But he didn't sell. He couldn't even log in to look at it. So he did nothing, and his contributions kept buying in at the bottom. Quietly, for 18 straight months, the cheap shares just kept piling up. And when it crashed all over again in 2020, the same exact story. He did absolutely nothing on purpose twice in a single working career. Dale also paid off his entire house, slowly and exactly on schedule. One ordinary payment at a time, for 30 straight years of his life. By age 58, the mortgage was completely and permanently gone. He drove the same truck 9 years. He took 1 vacation a year. From the outside looking in, Dale looked exactly and perfectly average. A modest house, a modest truck, a modest job, nobody ever guessed. Here's what Dale actually had the day he finally added it up. His 401k held $612,000. A small Roth IRA held $94,000. His house, fully paid off, was worth $310,000. Cash in the bank, $40,000. Add it together, subtract the zero he owed, a net worth of $1,056,000. Just over $1 million on a salary that never cracked $80,000. Built by a man who was absolutely certain that he was behind. And that's the thing he kept repeating. I thought I was behind. 30 years comparing his balance to loud headlines, feeling like he'd missed something. He never once checked where he actually stood on the real ladder. He never looked at his own escalator. He only watched the staircase. So what happened at 58? The very thing I promised at the start. Dale finally ran the percentile, and what he found genuinely shook him. So remember Dale? Here is exactly what happened to him at 58. He sat down with the Federal Reserve's own official benchmark data. The same numbers I gave you, checked carefully against his own age band. His total was $156,000. The median for his group, about $390,000. He was sitting at nearly 3 times the median for his exact age. And the top 5% household line, roughly $117 million, was no fantasy. He was now sitting within a rounding error of that very line. A few more years on the escalator, and he would cross it cleanly. Dale's reaction was not joy at all. It was something closer to grief. Because the first thing he said was, I could have enjoyed more. For 3 decades, he carried a quiet anxiety that he was failing. And he wasn't failing at all. He'd been in the top tier for years. He felt poor the entire time that he was quietly, actually winning. The number climbed silently while his self-image stayed stuck at behind. That is the twist. The danger was never that Dale would fall short. The danger was that he'd never even notice he had already succeeded. Let that fully sink in for just a second before we move on. A man crossed into the top tier of American savers and felt nothing. No celebration, no relief, just 3 full decades of unnecessary quiet worry. The cost of never checking was not money, it was peace of mind. And here the framework snaps into focus. Look back at the 3 signs. Sign 1, Dale's savings rate was 18%, double the national 7.7%. Sign 2, he never sold a thing through 2 historic market crashes. His boring index funds quietly did all of the heavy lifting for him. Sign 3, his net worth crossed into territory he never once measured. He hit all 3 signs, he just never connected them to winning. Here's the uncomfortable part, the part that applies directly to you now. Dale is not unusual at all. There are millions of Dales out there. High savings rates, paid-off homes, untouched index funds, top 10% or higher. And they would swear sincerely that they didn't quite save enough. The system is structurally built to make you feel like you're behind. Because the loudest number, the average, always pulls your eyes upward. So the real question isn't, how do I get rich at all? It's this, what if you already did the hard part and never checked? What if the escalator carried you the whole entire time, completely unnoticed? If you've got the 3 signs, you are far closer than you think. Let me prove that to you right now with the actual hard math. Let me walk you through how an ordinary balance becomes a top-tier one. No tricks at all, just compounding, shown step by step so you see it. Start with a number most disciplined 50-year-olds actually have, $300,000. We'll assume a 7% average annual return, the figure institutions use for planning. It's roughly the long-run average of a diversified, stock-heavy portfolio over time. Watch what happens if you simply leave it alone and keep contributing. Year 1, $300,000 at 7% earns $21,000. You add nothing yet. Pure growth alone, and the balance is already sitting at $321,000. You just earned a third of a salary doing absolutely nothing at all. That's the escalator's very first step. Now simply hold the pattern steady. $300,000 compounding at 7% for 10 full years becomes $590,000. The money nearly doubled while you slept, with no new dollars added. This is the exact part most people quit too early to ever see. Now add contributions back in, $12,000 a year, about 15% of $80,000. Start at $300,000, grow at 7%, add $12,000 each year, 15 years. The result is roughly $113 million. You just crossed the 7-figure line. Now look closely at what you actually did to get yourself there. You added $12,000 a year, just $180,000 in total contributions. But the balance grew by more than $800,000 overall in that time. The market did all the heavy lifting. You just refused to step off. Now here comes the single most important number in this entire video. In that 15-year run, almost nothing happens for the first several years. By year 5, you're at maybe $5,000-$10,000. It honestly feels slow. It feels like the effort simply isn't working for you at all. But the gap between year 10 and 15 alone exceeds $400,000. The last 5 years produce more wealth than the first 10 combined. Compounding is backloaded. It pays you the most right at the very end, which is exactly when most people, exhausted and doubtful, decide to stop. They step off the escalator one single floor below the actual top. Let me make this compounding curve completely impossible for you to forget. In the early years, the line looks almost flat and deeply discouraging. Your contributions are doing most of the work, and the growth feels invisible. But somewhere around year 10, the curve quietly begins to bend upward. And by the final stretch, growth completely dwarfs anything you personally contribute. That bend is the entire reward, and it only comes to those who wait. Most people quit in the flat part, completely certain that it isn't working. The patient ones simply stay, and they collect the entire bent upward payoff. So the real lesson of the math is almost embarrassingly simple to state. Start with something, add to it steadily, keep your costs low, and wait. That sentence, lived out for 2 decades, quietly outperforms almost every clever strategy. It beats the stock pickers, the market timers, and the people chasing the next hot thing. Boring, repeated long enough, becomes the single most powerful force in your finances. Here's the same idea at a much higher starting point. Dale's $612,000. Leave it completely alone, no contributions. He is fully retiring now. At 7% in 10 years, that quietly becomes $1.2 million. In 15 years, it becomes $1.69 million entirely on autopilot. The man who thought he was behind heads toward nearly $1.7 million. Early 70s, without lifting a single finger to ever get there. That is what a fully loaded escalator does once you are finally on it. Now the cost of the silent enemy, fees, in that very same frame. Take that $612,000 growing at 7% for 15 full years. With near zero index costs, it reaches about $169 million total. Now charge a typical 1% fee, dropping the real return to 6%. That same $612,000 over 15 years reaches only $147 million. That 1% fee quietly cost you $220,000 of very real money. On a larger balance, over longer, it runs well past $500,000. The fee compounds against you with the same force the market compounds for you. Which is why starving fees is the boring, invisible move of the top 5%. Let me put the whole escalator on one single screen for you now. A 7.7% saver, a $70,000 salary, a 30-year career, average fees. That person retires near just $430,000. Now change two boring dials. A 15% saver, same salary, same 30 years, but with low fees. That very same person instead retires sitting near $1.05 million. Same income, same job, and the same economy from start to finish. The difference, over $600,000, comes from just two boring dials. The savings rate and the fee, not the income, not stock picks. Not the timing, two dials, set once, left alone for 30 years. And that is the math behind every single one of the three signs. The high savings rate sets the dial in the very first place. The never sell discipline keeps you on long enough to actually be paid. And quiet net worth growth is just the escalator's altitude at the end. None of it requires being smart. All of it requires being consistent. And the patience to not look down and panic at the wrong moment. The people who get this right rarely feel like winners along the way. They feel like Dale, ordinary, slightly behind, vaguely anxious the entire time, right up until the day the numbers finally tell them the real truth. So what do you actually do with all of this? 3 concrete moves. Each one maps directly onto one of the 3 signs we covered. Move 1, find your real savings rate today. Do not just guess it. Pull up your very last pay stub and do the simple division. Take your 401k contribution, add the employer match, divide by gross pay. That percentage is the single most important number in your entire financial life. It matters more than your balance and more than your salary, full stop. If it's under 10%, the most powerful lever in finance sits unused. Every 1% you add is a permanent raise paid to your future self. The average saver sits at 7.7%. Quietly beat it, then beat it again. Move 2. Audit exactly what you're paying and then starve the fees. Log in and find the expense ratio on every single fund you own. If you see 0.8%, 1%, or higher, you are feeding the enemy. Compare them to a broad index fund, often costing just 0.03 to 0.10%. The difference looks trivial on the page, catastrophic over 30 long years. Paying an advisor 1% for just holding your money? Run the same math. Decide if that is a genuine service or simply a structural leak. Low-cost funds aren't the unglamorous option. They're quietly the top 5% option. Move 3. Build your real benchmark, then ignore the wrong one entirely. Once a year, not once a week, add up your full net worth. Every account, plus your home equity, minus every single debt you carry. Write that single number down, then compare it to your own age's percentile. Compare it, never, to the inflated average in some loud passing headline. Median net worth for ages 60 to 64 is around $390,000. The top 25% line about $1 to $113 million, top 5% near $117 million. Find exactly where you stand on that ladder, honestly and very clearly. You may find, like Dale did, you crossed a line years ago. Let me be very clear about who this advice actually applies to. You do not need to already be wealthy to use any of this. You just need a steady paycheck and the patience to stop fiddling. Everything else, as the data keeps quietly showing us, takes care of itself. And one final move underlies all 3 of them. Simply do less. Honestly, this is by far the hardest single instruction in the whole video. Every ad screams at you to do more, trade more, and react more. But the data says the exact opposite thing every single time, always. The savers who did the very least beat the ones who tinkered constantly. When the market crashes, keep buying and otherwise do absolutely nothing. When a hot stock is everywhere, your only job is to ignore it. The escalator does not need your help at all. It needs your patience. Set the dial, not the switch. That is the whole entire instruction. Do these 4 things, and you don't need luck or a high income. You need a decade or 2 of the most boring behavior imaginable. That is the entire secret, and it is almost insultingly simple to do. It's the reason the people who do it assume it can't be working. So let's go back to the escalator last time. If that image is still running in your head, good, it really should be. The silent stairs carrying you up while loud sprinters exhaust themselves beside you. That is the actual real shape of building wealth in America today. It's quiet, it's slow, it's almost entirely invisible while it is happening. People on the escalator rarely feel like they are even rising at all. They feel like Dale, ordinary, anxious, completely sure that they're behind. While the altitude climbs underneath them, year after year, totally unnoticed. The 3 signs are not loud. A high savings rate never announces itself. Patience during a crash doesn't trend. A net worth crossing makes no sound. That's the whole trap and the whole gift, both at the very same time. You'll almost never feel like you're winning at the moment you actually are. So if you have the 3 signs, believe the data, not the feeling. The loud money runs up the stairs and brags about it loudly. The quiet money just stands still and quietly arrives much higher up. So please don't ever mistake that long, patient silence for failure. Lazy investing built more quiet millionaires than any hot stock ever did. Check your escalator. You may already be near the top. You never look down.